Hello and welcome to Top Fives, the show of everything. Top Fives, presented by the Sex Effects. I'm Joy Prati.
And I'm Sean Day.
And folks, we have a freaking fantastic episode in store for you this evening. But before we get to all that, Jonathan, I'm going to kick it to you for some introductions.
Yeah, so we have a special guest tonight. He is a longtime family friend, a someone who I think I've known throughout my life because I've visited England a few times, and he's now living in Los Angeles, being a film critic. This is our special guest, James White, tonight. Hi, James.
Hi. Hi,
Welcome to the
folks. Hi,
show.
everybody.
Welcome to the
Hi.
show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for
Um,
having me. It's an honor.
Yeah, it's we were just saying off air. It's been a long time coming. My dad has kind of championed you to be on the show because of what you do for work and your love for movies. And I think it's like I'm so glad it's like finally here because I feel like we've been trying to put this together for a while. So really excited to have you on. And we have our list tonight are going to be we're going to kind of be shooting it to James to do our top fives list tonight. But it'll be cool to get to know what you do and how you feel about films and everything. So I guess just like a little introduction. Just tell everyone watching what you do, and I guess how we also know each other in a way. So
Well, let's start with that then. I have known Sean at least since he was born, pretty much. Yeah, I think I've known him since he was born. I wasn't there for the birth. I can't specify that, but yeah, I've known Sean's family for all of my life because his grandmother and my mother are best friends, or pretty much best friends in the world. They live opposite each other, like
yeah,
some kind of sitcom.
neighbors too.
Back in Sheffield, yeah, yeah. So I've known Sean's family all of my life. I consider Sean's family to be my family because the families are pretty much that close in terms of in terms of knowing each other, having grown up together. So
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. As for the job, yeah, I did in fact pay Sean's dad Michael a big amount of money to try and get him to pimp me on here. So we'll see. Hopefully it works out and doesn't ruin it for everyone. Yeah, in terms of my job, I have been working as I like to call it entertainment journalist, but that's a really fancy word for just sitting behind the keyboard and bashing out a load of words about movies, TV shows, whatever crosses my brain. I've been working for various different magazines for about 23 years now, which does
Ooh,
make me
okay.
sound ancient. I realize that. I'll be crumbling into dust at the end. I work for various publications. I'm a freelancer. I work for various publications. Mostly I work for Empire magazine, which is one of the big popular movie magazines from the UK. It's been around for 3 decades now, 3+ decades. Write a lot of stuff for their website, write a lot of reviews, write a lot of features and bits and pieces, and I do reviews and interviews and all sorts of stuff for a variety of magazines and publications, and occasionally I do stuff for the movie studios as well, interviewing people and sort of getting stuff on for them and interviewing people for them. Yeah, that's basically what I do.
That sounds like
That's
such a cool
awesome.
job.
How do you kind of get your foot in the door in something like that? Because I mean, obviously 23 years ago was a different environment where today everyone is behind a keyboard bitching about movies. How do you turn that into a career?
Well, I was a bit of luck, mostly, I would say. I studied communications at university, didn't do all that well, did okay, didn't do all that well. Wrote to a load of local newspapers to try and get in my foot in the door there, and that basically resulted in, I think it was 150 letters I sent, and that resulted in 148 no's, one maybe, and one, or at least more than one, actually saying like, hey, you should do this vocational qualification, this journalistic vocational qualification. So took a year out, worked in an office, saved up money, went to Liverpool in England and studied journalism for a year. As I just started learning everything to do with journalism, everything to do with like crime reporting, shorthand, which kids today probably don't even know what that is, but it's just basically the way of making like reporting, writing stuff really quickly if you're like you don't have a recorder, that kind of stuff. Was supposed to do work experience at this big fancy newspaper in England, and they called me about 2 weeks beforehand and said, oh, we can't take anyone at this moment, we're doing some transition or something's happening. So I basically looked at the magazines that were dotted around the floor of my university dorm, and there was one called Total Film, and I rang them up and I said, "Oh, do you do work experience?" And they're like, "Yes, we do. Can you come in?" And I came in for a week, They seemed to like the fact that I kind of knew stuff about movies, knew how to write, and liked the magazine. And so then they said at the end of the week, oh, we have a job opening up. It's the lowest of the low kind of job in a magazine, which is a junior sub editor, basically just fact checking and rewriting little bits and finding stuff out. Apply for that job, apply for the job, got it, and the rest is history. I basically just moved up from there. And then in like 2005, I decided what I really want to do is just write all the time. I don't really want to be an editor. I don't really want to have the responsibility. I just want to be a writer because that's what I'm good at. So then I moved to Los Angeles and have been writing and doing stuff here ever since.
That's awesome.
So cool. That's a really cool story.
Yeah. So, luck and some studying, maybe.
Yeah, you put in
the
the work. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I paid my dues and all that, but yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's cool.
That's really cool.
I was gonna say, James, what's the kind of most recent thing you have written for or have been involved in? I guess
what is the most recent
that you could say to us? I don't know if you have like non-disclosure kind of.
No, there's nothing. There's nothing. As far as I'm aware, there's nothing under NDA right now. I don't think so. There's just the last couple of bits I did. Well, the last things I've done recently, there's a magazine here called Backstory, which talks to a lot of like craft people. That talks to writers and directors and producers, editors, people who turn found footage into film festivals, and people who do poetry based on Star Wars. We talk to all sorts of people. And we just published our Oscars issue, and I did a load of stuff for that. I did Greg Fraser, the cinematographer of Dune. I did Joe Walker, the editor of Dune, mostly Dune people, actually. It was a lot of talking to Dune people like that. And then I've also done stuff recently. What did I do? Oh, my most recent review was a movie that I don't know if we're going to be talking about it later, but there's the movie out called Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is absolutely brilliant. That was the last movie review I read.
Yeah, one of my coworkers saw it, and he said it was a really very interesting movie, especially it's about like multiversal, which is kind of funny because a lot of these like Marvel and DC is doing all this multiversal stuff, but it looked really, really interesting, like visually, and I'm kind of curious to see what the story would be like with something like that. So
it's outstanding. It's one of the best movies I've seen in a long, long time, and it's crazy. It's brilliant. It's heartfelt. It handles intergenerational trauma. It handles all sorts. It's so good. It deserves to be awarded everything come awards time. I don't know if it will. We'll see. It might be too crazy for awards voters, but we'll see. And yeah, and of course it stars Michelle Yeoh, who is awesome and should be in everything. Should have had a career where she just gets to do whatever the hell she wants to do.
Yeah.
But she just proves in this that she's absolutely brilliant, and and Ki Hye Kwan, who was short round in Indiana Jones and has barely acted in the last like 20 years or so, and is outstanding. He is so good. He worked as an action choreographer and a first assistant director and worked with Wong Kar-wai and people like that. And he's just amazing in this, not just from an action standpoint, from a dramatic standpoint. Guy deserves to be working as much as he wants as well.
Wow. Okay, cool.
So cool.
Now,
see, why didn't they bring Short Round back?
Yeah.
Like,
who knew?
They brought in Shia, but they left Short Round out in the rain. That's terrible. But
Crying.
So we cover a lot on this show, like lots of superhero stuff, kind of the big pop culture stuff. How has that kind of shifted in the time that you've been covering movies? I mean, I can trace it from the time we were in high school to now. It seems like a completely different landscape. But I mean, in 23 years, you've seen it go from probably nothing, or death. What Batman and Robin was 97. So to Reborn, to Death Again, to how do you wrap your mind around all that?
It's tough. I mean, I've seen it evolve from, when I started, the bigger stuff was X-Men. The Fox X-Men movies were kind of around when I was starting and everything like that, and that was considered the Raimi Spider-Man stuff, that was considered mostly the gold standard, as it were, then. But I mean, they are a lot to do with it. Blade, the Raimi stuff, some of the other sort of bits and pieces Fox was trying to do have started to really do it. But I mean, with the birth of the MCU and Iron Man and everything like that, ever since that, that was the spark that really led to where we are today. And it's been a crazy explosion because it's overtaken everything. It's become everything. Brands, the big evolution I saw that I've seen so far is that the sort of evolution from the movie star selling the movie to the brand selling the movie.
Hmm.
You can have people who people love and who names you recognize, but Chris Evans is Captain America. Brie Larson, who's won an Oscar, is Captain Marvel. You know them as superhero characters, and they've taken everything. And it's been for both good and ill. I mean, I love to see the fact that Marvel is now huge and deservedly so, and have made some amazing movies and have done some very interesting things. They're not just people complain that it's like, oh, it's just another superhero movie, but genuinely, especially in the case of Marvel, they've tended to do different genres within the superhero sort of medium, as it were, and that's been great. But then at the same time, it feels like franchises have swallowed an awful lot of the airspace from movies.
Mm.
So a lot of movies that might be maybe more interesting or give other people a chance to make movies have kind of vanished off to streaming, or they found other outlets, or they've gone completely. And that's been kind of sad because you feel like you're not seeing quite as many movies given the space to breathe that they might have otherwise. But you know what? I love superhero movies, so I'm never going to be sat here being like, Marvel and DC are ruining cinema. It's just not true. It's not right. I mean, I completely get what Martin Scorsese says about cinema, and he is a master director whose opinion should be listened to. But at the same time, I'm sorry, Marvel and DC, Marvel in particular, DC as well, when they really are on their game and they give interesting directors interesting things to do, are great, and they really produce fun, interesting movies that I'm even looking forward to, like Doctor Strange. I mean, it's crazy. It's just everything. It's been really fun, and I've done my best to embrace it. I wasn't always the world's biggest comic book fan when I was a kid. I read a few comics, but I've had to have like a real sort of deep dive into all this stuff to be ready for every movie that keeps coming out. So, and at the same time, there are movies that you can find that do different things, like Everything Everywhere, like all sorts of different movies. You can find something right now. You just have to look a little harder these days.
Yeah, that's a big thing too. I just watched. I know it's like outside. It's not as crazy as these movies, but I just watched the Jackass Forever movie, which was quite hilarious. But I had to go to Paramount Plus, and that's the thing I've been seeing is this shift with all these, how we consume media now. I know there's still the theaters that we can go to see movies, but now it's just there's so much out there with these streaming services, and of course now we're seeing these different studios and companies buckling down and creating their own services and all these kind of things. So I guess also it's just how we consume it now is so different, I think, over the last 20 odd years. But that's hasn't changed how people enjoy films and like looking for those kind of unique films out there. So I think that's really cool. Yeah.
It's nuts. Yeah. I remember the days. Hell, I remember the days when I was a kid. I remember in England we had to wait sometimes 2 years for a movie to come over from America on video and stuff like that. It's if you try to explain that to someone today who's literally grown up with all the streaming services, they would look at you like, well, like you stepped out of some kind of time machine. It's just it doesn't seem possible the way we used to consume movies to the way people do it today, and you just have to adapt to it and embrace it. So yeah, it's fun.
It is. And you're covering, so you do reviews, but you were saying studios will also send you kind of on assignment and stuff like that. So you're covering behind the scenes stuff as well. Like, and that
Yeah.
I think is also another thing that has changed kind of dramatically in terms of not being limited to the pages of Total Film or something like that, where there's, or Empire, where 10, 15 years ago, people didn't really know all the behind the scenes stuff that went on. And now that's kind of all you hear about. So the movie, even if you haven't even seen the trailer yet, what's coming. Has that kind of impacted the way you write or the way you approach and trying to think about, maybe I shouldn't give this away, or maybe I should prepare audiences for that when they read this, or anything like that?
Yeah, that's always been a consideration. I mean, obviously, the timeline with magazines was always, we publish, a month each month and everything like that. And you have to prepare things several months in advance, usually, to get everything all together for one particular issue. You have to know that you're going on X set and talking to X person and doing this and that. We've always, I mean, at least for me and for the people I work with, we've always had sort of a drive to try not to give away things because we don't want to ruin the fun for people. But there are things, and I've seen it in the rise, even as I started, the rise of Ain't It Cool News and sites like that, which really began that kind of behind the scenes, or we learned from a source that such and such is happening in this movie, or such and such has quit this movie. And that's something you've, as a working journalist, you've kind of either had to embrace or try to completely ignore. So we will report on things that we hear, that things that come in, but we will try for the most part and keep things under wraps if we can, because if it's out there everywhere, everyone's going to see it, especially with the rise of Twitter, the rise of everything online. Everyone's going to have heard such and such just happened. Like a news story just broke today, like Justin Lin has left the Fast and Furious franchise. He's left Fast 10 after a week of shooting, which is kind of a weird story.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that kind of stuff happens, and you report it because it will be everywhere. And unfortunately, if people are going to be spoiled by some stuff, then they are going to be spoiled. But if you're on the internet, you're going to be spoiled. The other side to that, of course, is when I'm working, I will learn things about movies that are coming up that maybe I didn't want to know. I didn't want to know there's going to be a surprise cameo from X in a new movie that's coming out, a year in advance. I didn't want to know certain things, and you learn it, and you learn not to pass it on to other people because it's part of the job for me to learn these things and to feel a bit disappointed that I knew such and such was going to show up, knowing about like the Spider-Man showing up in No Way Home, everything like that. I mean, that was pretty much an open secret, but we found that stuff out fairly early on, and you don't really want to know it, but it's part of the job. I have to accept that it's a bit of my job, and I love my job, so it comes with it.
That's really cool. That's really cool. Yeah, Shawnee, I know you. Did I cut you off?
No. I'm just trying to. No. The video's a little choppy on the stream, so don't mind me if I'm kind of
over here. Okay. We don't have Oscar-winning cinematographers on this podcast, unfortunately. They're just webcams for the moment, but we're working on it. But yeah, that's awesome. I hope this stuff isn't like boring for you to kind of talk about, like, because I know this is like the last thing I would want is be like, oh, let me talk about my job for another hour or two. That'd be terrible.
It's okay by me. I mean, honestly, I spend my days asking other people questions, so this is kind of like a nice, refreshing, bit having it turn back on me, and so I realize what those poor actors have to put up with when I'm sat there asking them for the 17th time. So, what attracted you to this project? And that sort of thing. It's just, you just feel the life drain from their eyes. You're like, look, the studio asked me to ask this. It's not my fault. I'm not doing it. I wouldn't ask you that. I'd ask you a better question, but sorry. So yeah.
What would you say is like the percentage ratio or what have you between actors that kind of you can tell they have the same rehearsed response for every question that they get asked during the press junket, and then the other ones that are going to be brutally honest and kind of give you a good time? I can't imagine it's 50-50 or... No,
good question. I've never even really thought about what I would say probably 80-20 in terms of 80 is the group that have been basically coached and media trained until they're begging for death. And they're basically trotting out the talking points that, the studio's basically handed down to them and said, like, you will talk about this about the movie, talk about the theme, talk about how it encourages inclusivity and blah, 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 blah. And then you've maybe got the 20% of people who either because they just have the natural charisma to go off and riff and still get across some of the points they need to, but make it fun, or because they just do not give an F word. I don't know if you can swear on this, but F word.
Oh, absolutely. Go for it.
They do not give a monkeys. There we go. And they just don't care, and they will tell you whatever they're going to say anyway because they don't believe in press sound bites or anything like that. It's changed over the years. Sometimes you used to get longer print pieces where you'd just be able to sit down and have a proper conversation. A lot of my stuff these days is those between 5 to 15 minute sort of like video interviews, and especially these days, pandemic wise, it's a big thing on Zoom. I haven't done an in-person interview for 2.5 years now.
Wow.
Everything has been on Zoom, and that has been a big change because obviously they can edit everything and they can change anything they want to, and it's kind of crazy. So yeah,
That's
I miss. I
wild.
honestly miss it. I honestly miss it. I can't wait to get back and do my first like in-person interview. That said, it is kind of nice not to have to leave my house and fight LA traffic to go and talk to someone for 5 minutes about a movie I didn't like. So
That's so cool.
Shawnee, I think your mic is
Is it going nuts right now? Oh no.
it's spazzing out a bit. We always have an issue. We've
It's
been
all
doing
good.
this for 6 or 7 years, but we like to keep it very amateur hour over here, and keep
it's a
ourselves on
tradition.
our toes.
Traditions
Yeah,
are important, you know.
absolutely. Uh, you good, bud?
Trying here.
Okay.
Let me see if I can try a different microphone, see if that does anything.
Okay. Yeah, James, I'll keep talking. It'll be great.
Fine. It's nothing that the guy who's the professional music producer is having the sound issues right now.
Yeah.
you know,
It's
it's kind of a
it's
consistent theme on this show.
It's my 2012 MacBook Pro, so it's I'm due for an upgrade eventually here.
We'll get there.
Try a different microphone here.
Yeah, go for it.
Is this better? No. Probably not, huh? Better? No?
I mean, it's not buzzing. It sounds like you're in an echo chamber, but it's not bad.
It'll work for now.
All right, very good.
Okay.
Good.
Video is like completely frozen though. Oh man.
Oh,
It's
no.
okay. If anyone's
You can't see
watching,
me.
we apologize. We apologize for the issues right now.
Oh, man.
I just realized I think it's just old computer and it's just pushing on some old software or not up to date software. So we apologize for that, and hopefully if I could save up $2,000, I can get a new computer. So,
There we go.
yeah, it's still going. I think if anything, if we lose the videos, it's all good. We'll have the audio to post on Friday for you guys to listen to. Check it out. We'll see.
Yes.
But yeah,
Um, so
sorry.
it's okay, man. Just we're all good. It's like being on stage and the you hit the wrong chord, you just keep going. It's all good. It's all good. James, would you say that you were like a franchise kid growing up? You said you weren't too into comics, but like, was it action? Was it comedy? Like, what drew you to the movies originally?
Well, originally it was probably just being taken as a kid and really developing a love for it. I mean, I started with I think Aristocats, I think was my first movie, and then big stuff like E.T. I'm not quite old enough to have seen Star Wars in the theater, but I saw like Empire and Return of the Jedi and stuff like that. Kind of blew my mind and then got me into it. But the one movie, if I had to pick like one wellspring movie that really got me into movies and creativity all at once, it would be Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters, it's still my favorite movie. It will always be my favorite movie. I loved it dearly. I watch it every single year. I watch it on Halloween pretty much every year. I love that movie. I love the humor of it. I love the effects, even though comparatively to today's effects, they're nowhere near as good, but I still love them. They still look great. And something in it, the dynamic in it, the humor, the horror, the action, the mix of everything just sparked my imagination. I started writing Ghostbusters stories and like drawings and doing drawings and everything like that. And that started me writing. And then ever since then, I've just been writing. I basically knew I wanted to be a writer of some kind since I was about 11 years old, and figured why not channel that, what I love about movies and TV shows, into that. I always had opinions about movies and TV shows. I could always talk about them to my friends. So I basically thought, hey, why not do that for a job? They'll pay you no money practically, but you'll probably have fun. And yeah, so it's come to pass pretty much.
That's awesome. And do you write like strictly like review stuff, or are you writing your own creative work on the side as well?
A mixture, a lot less of my own creative work these days. I used to write a lot of short stories, things like that. I've tried to write scripts once or twice. I'm just not very much a natural script writer. But I've sort of dabbled occasionally here and there. You get to that point as a film critic, you're like, well, this movie's bad. I'm sure I can do better. And then you actually sit down, you stare at the blank page, or you try and write the outline. You're like, I don't know anything. I'm rubbish. I've written a book that I based loosely on like my dad and stuff like that, who was like a specialist police officer and did stuff like that, and I've turned him into like a James Bond character kind of thing.
Oh,
So I've
that's
done
cool.
that kind of stuff, but generally, given how much I write these days for work, just in terms of Empire, all the other magazines I write for, the studio stuff, and then my own like column that I write these days every week, just reviews and stuff. When I'm done with all of that stuff, usually I just want to veg out and just watch something that someone else has written, because my brain is tired and I don't want to use it anymore. So,
That is very fair.
I want to try and write more, but it's having the energy right now. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of people were like, "Oh, pandemic, I'm going to get a lot of writing done." And everyone I talked to was like, didn't get anything done, did I? No. So,
Yeah, that's true.
unfortunately.
I know some people, colleagues of mine who've done stuff. My friend Helen, who works for Empire, she's written, she's 2 books right now. Her latest book, which is called Women in Hollywood, plug, has just been published in paperback in the States. So she's
Oh, cool.
obviously found time in between writing loads of stuff for Empire and all sorts of other places to write an entire book, her second book. So, and it's brilliant and it's amazing, and I'm very jealous. So, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Shawnee, how we doing with the mic, bud?
Cool. Dang. Mike's. I don't know if it's making noise. I'm just gonna use my my camera mic.
Well,
Now I know it sounds like
I can hear you.
It's
Yeah, you're
all
good.
weird. Yeah.
Shawnee the fish. We're all good here.
The video might be I can kind of feel like there's a delay. So if I answer something like I don't know if it's like an internet thing or if it's just pushing it. I saw a error message says video encoding overloaded, so it must be something to do with like the video being pushed out to the stream. So sorry
That
guys for that. But I can hear everything, which is good. So
that's great.
hopefully it's you guys are hearing it on the stream, and yeah.
I sure hope. I sure hope so.
Trying to get this thing.
Let's see. So yeah, we were talking earlier, like usually we open up and we'll do introductions and then we'll do some pop culture news and then dive into lists, and we completely missed the news, so I apologize. You mentioned one thing today, which was what did you say? What happened today? The James Lin.
Justin Lin has left. He's left Fast X. They've been shooting for
Yes.
a week, and he's announced that he's not going to be doing it. He's staying on as producer, and I think he actually co-wrote this one. So
Oh wow.
I'm always kind of confused when they say like, oh, it's creative differences. I'm like, dude, haven't you been on this movie for like 6 months now?
Right.
The time for the creative differences would have been before the movie was like rolling.
Yeah.
And the big things were blowing up and the stuff was happening. But I respect Justin Lin. He's a great filmmaker. He's done so many of these movies. He's responsible for half the Fast and Furious movies, and if he's decided that something isn't right for him, he's going to move on, and fair play to him. But it's just a surprise because they were whole hog.
Yeah.
They were going full ball with this thing. And then finally, it's like the Fast and Furious movies. There are creative things, but anyway, that sounds. I love the Fast and Furious movies. They've been very good to me over the years. So, yeah.
The I off the top of my head, I would assume it's probably Vin Diesel being like, "No, I'll direct it. It's fine." But I don't know.
No, I don't think you were wrong about that. I have if the announcement comes in like a week that like Vin hits his Instagram and tells you about the melodious, sanctimonious sanctuary. I don't know, whatever it is he's going to say, that he's found out about, that he's discovered that the key to the civilization of the universe is him directing the next Fast movie, then we'll see.
That'll probably be not too far off.
Wouldn't shock me. Would not shock me.
Have you had a chance to see the Batman?
I have seen the Batman.
Did you like it?
Yes, I like the Batman a lot. Yeah, I'm a big Matt Reeves fan. I loved his Planet of the Apes movies. I've liked pretty much everything he's directed. So I was kind of excited for him to take on Batman, even though it's, the 79th take on Batman. I liked a lot of what he did. I really liked the movie. I didn't love it completely, but I very much enjoyed it. Yeah, and I am entirely unsurprised that they've just announced the sequel. So yeah,
Yeah.
$759 million at the box office in the pandemic era. Yeah, they're making another one.
Pretty good. Yeah. I have to say I like it a lot more on rewatch. What was that, Shawnee?
Oh
Shawnee?
man,
What?
our delays. I said, yeah, I totally agree with the remaking the second one for sure. Oh man, this is. Oh god, guys. All right. Okay. Continue, Joey.
Oh, all right.
Oh, this is gonna be
My
fun.
shoulders are just killing me tonight, Shawnee. Um, well, okay, yes. So they're making a second The Batman. I wonder if they'll call it These Batman or something like that. Are there any particular villains that you'd like to see in a follow-up?
Oh, good question. Good question. I mean, they introduced Barry Keoghan as the Joker, so that could be an alleyway. Maybe they're exploring, even though Matt Reeves has said, we're not gonna really do that." I would be fascinated to see how, sort of this more focused, down to earth, less fantastical Batman deals with something like Poison Ivy. I'd be interested to see how you do
Ooh.
something like Poison Ivy. Hell, I given how much I've enjoyed her just generally, I wouldn't mind seeing Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn show up just to cause a bit of chaos. But I don't see them crossing those streams in particular. I don't think it's ever going to be part of the DCEU. But yeah,
Yeah.
something like Poison Ivy, I will be fascinated to see how someone like Matt Reeves, who really goes for the street level, Detective Batman, deals with something like that. So yeah, maybe that could be fun. They haven't said anything yet. We don't know what is going to be the story for the new one, but yeah, I will be fascinated to see that.
That would be very cool. She didn't even cross my mind. I saw a fan made like poster and it was the kind of hinting at Mr. Freeze being the next villain. I'm like, that actually wouldn't be a bad, how the Batman, all the images had the red filter. This one had like a blue filter over it. I was like, oh, that actually kind of I like that a lot. But I didn't care for that Barry. How do you say his name? Barry Keoghan?
Barry Keoghan, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just tired of seeing the Joker, or I'm tired of seeing actors do their takes on the Joker. Like I just do the Joker. You know what I mean? Like, but
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
like, I was
yeah,
glad it was relegated to a deleted scene. So hopefully they can change the look around a little bit. But
yeah.
I get very particular about Batman. So that's my weakness. Um, yeah. Shawnee, who do you want to see in a sequel to the Batman?
Joey's a big Batman fan for sure. I agree with you for Mr. Freeze. I think that would be really cool. The Batman reminded me of kind of Arkham Asylum or Arkham series games that they had, which had a very interesting kind of visual look at Batman, and they had all the different villains inside the game, and I liked how they did it in the game, where Mr. Freeze, the kind of how they designed them and gave him a little backstory and everything. So it would be really cool to see that. Someone like Clayface, but I don't know if that would live in this world that they're trying to put together. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think of course we have the Penguin. Penguin's going to be kind of his role will be a little more in the light on this one. So that'd be really cool to see Colin Farrell. I mean, I still couldn't believe it was when the trailer dropped for that movie, and I think I read Colin Farrell's in the movie, and I was like, wait, which character is he?
You mean Richard Kind?
Really impressive. But I have
Yeah.
not watched it a second time. Yeah. Yeah,
Wow, that
I
lag
have
is deep.
I have not watched it a second time, and I kind of I want to. It's bad, right? Yeah, I know. I could tell on here, but I'm gonna try to push through. Yeah, it's I'm trying to watch it. I wanted to watch it last week, but I just got kind of busy. But I want to watch it again and kind of see if it changes a little bit of my opinion on it. Joey and I, we did a full episode on the Batman as far as our thoughts on it, and it's kind of straight out of seeing it. So, and we both saw it in theaters, which is really cool. I've only seen like a select few movies this year since stuff kind of opened up again here. So
I'm in that Scorsese camp where I bitch about movies being taken over by the superhero flicks and everything. And then the only two movies I've seen since going back to the cinema is Spider-Man: No Way Home and the Batman. So I'm gonna go kill myself. But Shawnee, should we move on to some lists? And while I'm talking and while the lag is going, I'm throwing it to you to kick things off, sir.
okay.
There we go.
It doesn't delay too much. So James, these lists, and usually we have a list that we all do, but I felt like this was a cool opportunity to, since we're in the kind of flip side of the seat for you, having these two lists for you tonight. So you've talked about your job and what you do, and I think you've actually told me about a few things few people you've been able to interview. So one of the lists tonight that we have for you is what are your top 5 interviews that you've had?
Okay.
Spanning across your whole career as a film journalist.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's some I just can't remember because either they weren't very good or it's just been too long ago. I mean, it's been a while. It's been a while I've been doing this. So let's see. All right. Well, I tried to sort of think about some of the really memorable ones and some of the ones that are interesting for maybe different reasons, as opposed to just being like, hey, they were quite fun and entertaining. But the first one, I think number 5, I'm going to go for, which was a really entertaining one, was on the set of the movie Real Steel, which was from a few years ago, directed by Sean Levy and starring Hugh Jackman. And it was both Levy and Jackman. I was actually on the set for 2 days, which was really unusual, even sort of when I was really doing a lot of set visits, when we could do set visits a lot more. So I spent 2 days with these guys, basically embedded on the set of Real Steel. And I got to admit, it was one of the days was a Friday. And that is a day traditionally when he's working on a movie set that Hugh Jackman has this really lovely tradition where he buys like lottery ticket scratchers for the entire crew, no matter what position you're in, whether you're a gaffer, whether you're on craft service, whether you just like help him pick up his underwear somewhere, that kind of stuff. He buys a lottery scratcher for everybody and hands them all out to everybody all around the crew on Friday, and the cast and everyone. And he handed me one because I'd been on set for those couple of days and everything. And that, honestly, that was one of the most memorable interviews I've ever done, only because the two of those men, you've probably seen it a little bit more recently with like Sean Levy and like Ryan Gosling. God, look at me. Hello. Ryan Reynolds, the other Ryan, the one he's been working with, for the last 2 films now. Sean Levy is quite possibly one of the most charming people you could ever hope to meet. He is just very passionate about what he does. And while I haven't loved every single movie and TV show that he's ever made, because he's made a lot, I can't help but have appreciation for who the guy is. He was just great. He and Jackman together were like a charisma powerhouse. And that just made it so incredibly memorable. That just made that interview memorable. I just remember them candidly talking about their friendship, which you've seen now continue into the Ryan Reynolds era, where they're both making fun of Hugh Jackman, because as people well know, Jackman and Ryan Reynolds are really good friends, and constantly snipe at each other and constantly have fun. So yeah, that was a real sort of like experience. The whole package was being on the set of a giant movie where they were having fake robots fighting, and where they were having to stop the CGI stuff happening and stuff like that. And these two incredibly like charming people, like just selling the movie to you in a way that didn't make it feel like they were selling the movie to you. So yeah, that I've got to admit was one of my favorite ones. That was a really good one. Yeah. Let me see. Oh, number 4. Moving on to number 4. Steve Carell. Steve Carell, who is also, you will not be probably surprised to learn, a very nice man in general. I did him a few times during the year. I can't remember, it was the year that he was still on. I think he was still on, technically, I think he'd still been on The Office. He was also in this little indie movie called Seeking a Friend for the End of the World, in which he co-starred with Keira Knightley. And he, again, this is me just stating, people are nice. He was just could not be friendlier. Because he I'd interviewed him a few times, about 3 or 4 times that year for different projects he'd been in. He started greeting me like, "Oh, Mr. White, you're here. Let's do this." And that goes a long way to making you feel good about people. They could probably be kicking puppies in the real world, and you'd probably be like, "Oh, actually, he seemed like kind of a nice person. Yeah, I like that person. He was nice to me, so yeah, the puppies will have to just get their own deal." But yeah, he genuinely is a guy who can come up, as you might understand. He's an improv guy. He can come up with fun stuff on the fly. He could instantly sort of just come up with good jokes and good everything, and he made for really, really good interviews because he genuinely, a bit like Levy and Jackman, he can sell the project without seeming to sell the project, and he will make you feel like he's the most entertaining person in the room and you are his friend while he's talking to you. But then afterwards, he doesn't just switch off and become, once the cameras switch off, he doesn't just become like, "Oh, I'm an actor, I've got to go away and talk to my team." He's like, "Oh, how are you doing? How's life?" Everything like that. So yeah, that's genuinely memorable.
That's cool.
Number three, quite different. Number three was quite different. Number three was Mr. Nick Nolte, a classic, a real veteran of the craft. It was for a movie, a Robert Redford movie called The Company You Keep. And I was waiting 10 minutes to talk to him, which isn't unusual. Sometimes you have to wait. It was like a one-on-one video interview. I was waiting 10 minutes, then I was waiting 15 minutes, then I was waiting 20 minutes, then I was assured he'll be here very shortly. And then he shows up in one of the hotel's bathrobes. I think he had some kind of clothes on underneath it, but he was definitely in a bathrobe. And he started the interview. I'm not sure. I cannot speak, and I won't go ahead and defame the man or libel the man or whatever the hell, slander the man, whatever the hell it is you do when you're just talking or it's being recorded, how it works. But he might have had something to drink before he started the interview. He can't speak to that. Don't know. Might have seemed like it. He also then proceeded to fall asleep while the interview was happening. I'm not sure what that says about my interview skills or my personal charisma, which I'm British. It's probably fairly dull anyway. So yeah, he was interesting. He was definitely interesting. That interview has never been used. Has never seen the light of day. Probably never will see the light of day, unless I can dig it up from the vault somewhere and threaten the studio with it. But yeah, that was memorable. That was memorable.
That's a good plan.
I mean, look at that. If you don't want anything out there, do that. Yeah, I've had interviewees you feel like don't want this interview to be seen, and they will make every effort not to have that interview to be seen. So sometimes they'll swear, sometimes they'll do this, that, the other. It depends. There's every trick you can imagine. Any trick you can imagine. All right. So number two, this was an early one for me. This was early in my day. This was one of the earlier junkets. Not the first. Definitely not the first. It was a few years into my gig, but it was one of the most exciting junkets I went on. I did the Finding Nemo junket, which is like, I'm a huge Pixar fan, a massive Pixar fan, and back then was even more of a massive Pixar fan. And this was the full-on, like, this was when studios, I think they do this for some like highfalutin like Vanity Fair type people these days, but they really did everything they can to make you think kindly of the movie. They did the full thing. They put us up in the Four Seasons in San Francisco. They gave us a giant like gift bag of toys and stuff from the movie. They took us to Pixar to do the interview. And Pixar is one of those places, it is quite literally like going behind the scenes at Wonka's Chocolate Factory. It blew my tiny little mind going to Pixar for the first time. I've been lucky enough to go about 4 or 5 times, and I want to live there. I've made a secret plan, which is not going to be secret anymore because I'm saying it on this podcast, but I'm going to go on a junket for them. I'm going to go and move into the cereal room and hide in one of the walls in the cereal room that they have. They have a whole room just of cereal for the animators. And I figure if I hide in the walls, there's food there. There's probably some milk I can drink. And they won't discover me for, I don't know, a year, maybe 2 years. And I'll just live there. I'll just live at Pixar. But anyway, that's by the by. We're at Pixar. And one of the interviewees is Ellen DeGeneres, who, I only really knew, I'd known basically that she was a talk show host, and I knew her from her comedy, like her sitcom and her stand-up comedy stuff, but didn't know her as well as, someone who lives here and knows more about Ellen. But of course, she plays Dory, and she was doing one of these roundtables. There were about 8-9 of us on a big roundtable in a conference room in Pixar. So I'm already just overjoyed. I'm already happy because I'm a Pixar, and it's like a happy place. But she's being charming, she's doing the funny thing, and then one of the journalists has to excuse themselves to do something, which is something I've rarely ever seen. In the middle of a roundtable interview, I've rarely seen people excuse themselves. I don't know if they were called away to do another interview. I've seen that happen because schedules are very tight, schedules are weird, you tend to clash sometimes. But they had to go away and do something, and they came back. And before they came back, Ellen DeGeneres said, "Okay, here's what we're going to do. Just you alert me when this person's going to come back, and we'll do a thing." And so, just as this person comes in, she just sits back and she goes, "And that's the story of exactly why I came out. It's not the story I told the press. It's the real reason." And just to like completely punk this guy who'd been out of the room, this poor journalist. And so we're all just like falling over ourselves. So Ellen DeGeneres has to go on the list just for being immense, just for being hilarious and doing that. And in the middle of a kids, in the middle of a big junket for a kids movie, she's just like, "Yep, let's do a rude joke about something." And it's just like, it's fantastic. I remember that to my day. I can remember exactly where we were sitting. I can remember how, what she said, everything that happened. It just stuck in my brain, and that's the way to make an interview memorable. Now, necessarily, I didn't use that bit in my final piece because it's not maybe the thing that people want to read about Finding Nemo, but it's stuck in my head for all time, and that was roughly what 2002, 2003, something like that. So I've remembered it for 20 years plus.
That's cool.
So number one was a big one for me. It was when I was still in the UK, and it was for possibly one of my, still less so these days, I don't know, excuses work and everything, but still one of my favorite directors, and that was Cameron Crowe. I am a huge Cameron Crowe fan. I've loved Almost Famous. I love Say Anything. I love singles. I'm one of these people that love singles, which most people, when you say, what Cameron Crowe movies do you love, you don't often get singles as one that people love. But I was a grunge kid in 1992. I loved singles. It was everything I wanted. And the chance to talk to Cameron Crowe was one I could not pass up. I kind of wish I'd gotten to talk to him for Almost Famous, but it was for Elizabethtown, which, if generously, kind of like the start of a slightly shift into lesser Cameron Crowe work. Maybe he had all these amazing hits early on, these big movies that people love and adore, and a lot of the stuff he's done kind of since then just hasn't had the same impact. But Cameron Crowe, chance to interview Cameron Crowe, and he was everything I'd hoped. He was charming and sweet and lovely, and he basically, in the middle of the interview, he just said, "Okay, so you've seen Elizabethtown now. What would you do to change the movie if you could? What do you think worked about it? What didn't work about it?" And that is not something I'm used to hearing from movie directors in particular. And he was so open about it. And I told him what I loved about it. I told him the bits I didn't love so much about it. And he was so just thoughtful and interesting about it. And that has always stuck in my brain. I will always, no matter what he's done kind of since then, and I will always defend the man because I've always found him to be just a genuinely nice guy and a genuinely thoughtful interviewee. And he, of course, was fascinating because he used to be a journalist back in the day himself. So he knows how to talk to journalists. And yeah, that will always stick in my head.
That's awesome. That's really, is he maybe your number one director?
Yes, probably. He's up there. It's hard for me to pick a favorite director across all genres because there are people that I think do amazing work on, action movies. I think the Russo brothers have done great stuff recently and are still doing good stuff in their particular genre. I love Tim Burton stuff. I love all sorts of people. I mean, I love Matt Reeves stuff. I love all sorts of people. I loved, I've loved different people's work at different times for different things. So, but he was definitely up there. Back in the early days of my career, he was my ride or die number one. So, yeah.
Right on. That's awesome. That's a good list. I wouldn't have the Nick Nolte one. That's hilarious. Goodness.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've got a list for you if you don't mind doing one more. Curious, in the time that you've been working, in this profession, and I guess maybe we could limit it to the movies that you reviewed exclusively, but In this length of time, what are your top 5 movies since you've been a professional?
Well, I thought about this when Sean sort of dropped word that you wanted me to sort of think about this a little bit. What I've kind of tried to do is I've slightly tailored it to the experience around the movie that fed into the movie. And now a couple of these are really favorite movies of mine. So, you know, I am sticking to the brief for the most part, but I'm also going rogue. So don't mind me. So yeah, so I've kind of tried to think about movies that where they've had something that's happened around them at the same time that really sort of fed into how I experienced them. So let's start with number 5. It is a movie that I love and I really like, The Sixth Sense. Now, The Sixth Sense is a movie that I saw ahead of time, so I wasn't well. Technically, I wasn't supposed to have been spoiled by it because I saw it. It was actually when I used to work back in the day when I used to in the first office at Total Film that I worked in. That office used to be a film distribution company's office, and they had a screening room in the office, which was kind of awesome for like a full-on like mini theater, like in the middle of the office, like a room that you could go and watch movies in, which for a film magazine is the most awesome thing you can imagine. So we were going to go and see that. Literally 5 minutes before I got into the screening of that, I happened to read something. There's a guy who he did the it was like a comedy thing he used to do online called like I can't remember what it was called, like the edited script or something like that, and it was always like a parody take on movies. And like an idiot, I happened to read this thing 5 minutes before I walked into the room to see The Sixth Sense. And hey, guess what that featured? Oh, yes, it featured the big twist. So I literally learned the big twist, even though here I was on a film magazine, access to the film before it came out in UK cinemas. It had come out, I think, a little bit just before in US cinemas, but I'd avoided everything about it, which you could do still back in the day. But literally 5 minutes before I'm seeing the damn movie, twist spoiled. I'll always remember that. Fortunately, the movie I think is so good that it didn't ruin me on the movie. I think it's one of Bruce Willis's best performances. I think Haley Joel Osment is amazing in it, and I think it's probably still maybe up there with something like Unbreakable, but one of the best things that Shyamalan's done. So yeah, that fits in. Number 4, a little bit more recent, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which is a movie I adore and I love, and I think breaks all sorts of barriers when it comes to animation. I think they do really interesting things. I think it's a great way to use animation. I think it's a great way to use the Spider-Man, the sprawling nature of comic books. You know, the fact that there's 10,000 variations on every character and 10,000 stories to tell. This has the room to do that. I cannot wait for Across the Spider-Verse, and now as they're calling it Beyond the Spider-Verse, which will be next year in 2024, I think. But that movie I saw in the basement of the Irving Thalberg building on the Sony lot, which was already cool to sort of go to the Sony lot. I mean, I've been to the Sony lot before, but to see it in this classic old 1920s building in an old cinema, in an old theater in the basement, where you feel like you're being taken down there to be murdered, which I'm sure if you say bad things about the movies, you might be. But just seeing it in there, it's like the perfect, like old school. You can imagine, like, because when it was MGM, you can imagine them like editing Wizard of Oz or something like that in that room, and seeing it in a real like historical movie room. It really just gives it that feeling. And then to see a movie which is basically the future of movie making and blows your mind and makes you feel grateful you get to do this job, that was quite something. That was quite something. Number 3 is the movie First Man, which I like a lot. It's not out there in my favorite movies, but I like it a lot, which was the Ryan Gosling movie about Neil Armstrong. That one is memorable because I saw that at the Kennedy Space Center. We did a junket for First Man at the Kennedy Space Center. We literally did the interviews for that junket in a press room off near the Vehicle Assembly Building, which is that gigantic building with the flag on it where they build the space shuttles and bring the space shuttles out to the launching pad. So, you know, you've got they were bringing one of the shuttles out, and not the shuttles, they're bringing something else out like a I don't know what it's like, a weather satellite rocket or something, but that was slowly making its way out as we're doing these interviews and everything like that. And I am, as well as movies and TVs, I am a huge space nerd. a huge space nerd. I used to have pictures of cross sections of space shuttles on my bedroom wall when I was a kid. Nerd. But love it, love it, love it. So to see that movie in an IMAX theater at the Kennedy Space Center, and then to interview people, was something that I can't detach the movie from that experience, and that fed into it, and that I love it. I've always said that we didn't get to talk to them for that, but I've talked to astronauts before, and I get starstruck around astronauts. Celebrities, big people, vaguely nervous sometimes depending on who they are, but it's become my job. Astronauts, for some reason, I'm just like, you've been in space. So yeah, that was all part of it. That was all part of it. Number two, Scott Pilgrim versus the World, which is a movie I adore. I love. I was a huge fan of Edgar Wright's work before that. This one I saw at Comic Con 2010, the year it came out. I'd done a junket the day of, I think it was the day of or the day after, something like that. We interviewed all the cast and Edgar and everyone like that. It had been huge, done loads of things, and then they did the presentation for it at Comic Con, which, if you've ever been to Comic Con, is just huge and crazy and fun, but exhausting at the same time sometimes. And attending it as a journalist is interesting because while you do get to go for free, you don't have to pay for press promotion to do it, but there's the upside and the downside. The upside is you get it for free, and you sometimes get studio access to their panels, so you're not queuing all night the night before with a bunch of Twilight fans to try and get into Hall H. But at the same time, you are trying to, especially in the days when everyone was there, you were fighting the schedule to try and you had to try and at least have 2 or 3 people of the team there, because some person's got to sit in Hall H and do the presentations, someone else doing a junket there, someone else is on the floor talking to people, someone else is doing something else. It's gone nuts. But yeah, they did the presentation for Scott Pilgrim, and then Edgar Wright invited everybody who had a certain ticket, I think it was, out of the presentation hall to go to the gas lamp quarter to a cinema to see Scott Pilgrim for the first time. And we knew, and now this is one of the things where we knew in advance that was happening, and we'd already been invited because Edgar Wright is a big friend of Empire. One of our guys has been on all of his movie sets and knows him quite well and talks to him a lot and all this kind of stuff. So he'd invited the Empire team to this thing, told us about it, but told us to keep it quiet. So we had to stay stum, and he announced it as a big special thing at the end of the presentation, took everyone on a big march to the gas lamp quarter, and we watched it. We watched the movie, and then there was a concert by Metric, one of the bands that's in the movie as one of the fake bands. And it's just that was mind-blowing. That was to see it with a crowd so perfectly primed to see that movie, and with the concert at the same time, and the way we were feeling after the Comic-Con presentation, that informed me. And I will love Scott Pilgrim to the day I die. I will defend that movie to the day I die. I know it didn't do very well at the box office, but it's amazing. It's fantastic. I think it's underappreciated. So then, number one, getting right back to the superhero territory, a little tiny movie I like to call The Avengers. Now, that was something I watched it here relatively early. I'd known it was coming. Obviously, we all knew it was coming because of the build up to it and everything like that. But I was probably one of the first journalists to see it, and a group of journalists who were invited to an early press screening. And that was almost like a religious experience. Even after my vague non-comic book history, the Avengers movies, the Marvel movies, had basically built me up into a fan, and this was the culmination. This was everything I wanted to see on screen, sort of the perfect amalgamation of all these different heroes all at once on screen, just in real, and working together, and a movie that actually works really well, no matter what you might think about the problematic person behind it these days, but sort of melded everything together to separate the art from the artist. It is art. It's a literal little work of art. It's a perfect little movie. It's hilarious. It's action-packed. It's emotional. And that was then. And then I went home and I wrote a review of it, and I said the Hulk, maybe the effects of the Hulk weren't quite as good as they could have been, and I'm forever shamed about that. I forever feel bad about that. I actually wrote a piece, I think, what was it, 10 years after that, saying, sorry for saying that. I would give it 5 stars if I had it to do it today, because I think the effects are great, and I don't know what I was thinking when I walked out of that place. So, yeah, That sticks in my mind forever. I remember walking out of there with a few other journalists who really weren't fans and were really what the hell was that all about? And I just basically leaned back against the back of the elevator in the studio lot and just basically said to myself, I've just seen a religious experience and I'm forever changed after that. So yeah, not to sound too hyperbolic, but I was forever changed, and that day I became a man. Wait, no, none of that's true, but I did enjoy it. I did enjoy it a lot. So
Yeah, that's great. And that's really, I mean, Avengers is kind of the point where you can look at the recent history of film, at least, and kind of go, okay, oh 08 you had Dark Knight and Iron Man, and then in 2012 you had Dark Knight Rises and Avengers, and one was like almost the death of these singular stories, and then the birth of, all right, every movie is going to have a cameo, every movie is going to splinter off into these, and it really has changed everything. That's awesome. That's a good list.
For good and in some ways ill, maybe, but there's no denying that if you just watch the Avengers, which for some reason British people forever grinding their teeth at this is called Avengers Assemble. I think because there was the old TV show The Avengers in the UK and they didn't want anyone to be confused. But I'm sorry, I don't think you look at a movie with the Hulk and Tony Stark and think, oh, is that 1960s black and white TV show? No, and they made an Avengers movie and it had Sean Connery and giant teddy bears in it and people hated it. So no, don't worry about it. Just call it Avengers. It's the Avengers. They've earned the right to be the Avengers now. So yeah.
I like it. Well, those are good lists. Those are very good lists. Sheesh. Our buddy worked as an animator on Into the Spider-Verse, and now he's at Pixar. So there's two little things for you.
I want to know who that person is. I want to know their name, their address, and I need to meet them and be their friend now. Basically.
I'll send you his contact information. He'd love to hear from you, honestly.
That's awesome.
Our buddy Danny Rodriguez, yeah. We've had him on the show. He talked about Spider-Verse and his time at Pixar, which has been all remote. So
right, that must be crazy. Yeah.
He's like, I'm finally at my dream job, and now it's remote. Like,
I'm not at my dream job. that must be a gut punch. I watched the documentary, the one about making Turning Red, and seeing all the team just like making it in their homes and everything with the kids around and everything. It's just, I have even more respect for them now. Just basically taking a movie like those movies and making them on their home computers and having to like coordinate and zoom and I can't even imagine it. It's worthy of respect. It really is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Shawnee, how's your audio going? Still getting that lag, huh? All right, very good. Not yet, huh? Okay. All right, well, that's okay. James, is there anything that you would like to kind of share with our audience or, no? Okay, well, all right. Is there anything that we usually do like a little share time after our list of like, oh, I saw this movie, or read this book, or tried this new app or something? Is there anything that you'd like to kind of put out into the universe for our listeners?
Okay, a couple of things. I mean, I think I've raved enough about Everything Everywhere All at Once, but please go and see it in the theater if you can. It deserves it, and it deserves all the support. It's been making some money. It's been doing well, but I love it. I'm trying to think what else is there. I mean, Better Call Saul just came back, and I love that show. And I'm sad it's ending, but I know it has to end, and I'd like people to watch that. Beyond that, I think I'm good right now. I'm good. Those are the two things I would plug right now, I think.
Right on. And at the let's hope this works. Jonathan, is there anything that you would like to share with our dear, sweet, lovely imaginary audience? Oh, he's 30 seconds behind.
Oh wow.
Oh boy. Well, Sean, when you start talking, just I'll stop. And I'll even message it to him.
Yeah, I'm so behind, guys. That's why I haven't said anything this whole podcast. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I have nothing really much to share. I did see Jackass Forever, and I saw Jackass Forever. That was great. It's on Paramount Plus.
really cool to see a movie like that where Jackass 20 years later, Lee Crew from Jackass is doing the same old silly stuff. So um, yeah, that's pretty much it. Not much. I again apologize for the delay, syncing delay. I was like, I was listening pretty much to the whole conversation you guys were having, but it was like so far behind. I didn't want to say anything and like having kind of cut in like randomly. So, I guess again taking this opportunity to thank James for coming on. We'd love to have you on again as well sometime as a guest. We're trying to get some more guests to come on, and it's always cool when we have some reoccurring guests that come on the show. So we really appreciate your time. And yeah, I'm gonna say this because I guess we're gonna go to our kind of ending segment. So for me, you guys can find me at Sean Day Music and on my website seandaymusic.net. Check it out. We also have a band, Blind Issues. Joey and I, my brother, and our buddy Andrew, Blind Issues. So search us up on Spotify or any other streaming platforms and find our EP, Deep and Meaningful, which has 2 singles on there. So check it out. Take it away, guys.
Very good, Shawnee. I was gonna message you and be like, hey, why don't you just give your handles while you have the floor? But you read my mind. This is why we do the show. This is why we're brothers. James, where can people find you and your work on the internet?
You can generally find me. I'm on empireonline.com, which is my usual stomping ground. I write a lot of the news stories, 1 or 2 featurey things, occasional reviews for them. I'm also available. I'm also in the pages of a magazine called SFX, which is a big sci-fi magazine in the UK, which is one I've been working for years and years and years. And also these days, for the last year or 2, I've had a Substack, which I know is a big thing these days. And it's you can just search Jay Wrights on Substack. That's JAYWRITES. Wow, I remembered English. And I basically write a weekly column of reviews of just TV shows and movies and things that I'm checking out right now. And I also write the occasional like pop culture column if I feel like it. Occasional opinionated. I've had a couple of interviews on there. So yeah, that's generally where you can find me. Also, Jam White on Twitter, where my ramblings are generally found. At Jamal White on Instagram, although I don't really post much on that because I'm very bad at Instagram. And also I'm just James White on Facebook, and you can probably find me that, because that's a name where if you search for it, you won't find 10,000 versions of it. Oh wait, you probably will. So yeah, you can just find me, but Jam White, I would say on Twitter is the best place to find me.
Wonderful. And we've just added you and retweeted you. So please, dear imaginary audience, please go and follow James. You can check me out at Joey Prati on Instagram, at Joey Prati on Instagram and on Twitter, and on my website, joeyprati.com. You can check out the show at Top 5 Pod. That's TOPFIVE 5 POD on Instagram, on Twitter, at gmail.com, or on YouTube, Apple Music, Google Play, SoundCloud, all of them, Spotify. So please give us a like, give us a listen, give us a follow, give us your love. And usually I pass it to Sean, but we're not going to wait 30 seconds. Thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure speaking with you, and hope to have you on again. Until next time, I'm Joey Parati, that's Sean Day, and thank you for listening. Oh, classic.